What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my Banlist predictions for January 2018. If you guys don't know, we're supposed to be getting a new Banlist no sooner than January of 2018. And the last time the Banlist said this was saying that on our previous Banlist that we weren't going to get a Banlist before November 2017. But they gave us the Banlist actually a few days before that, right at the end of October. So I'm predicting we're actually going to be getting a Banlist right before January starts. Maybe right after Christmas, I'm not too sure, or maybe it'll be right at the beginning of January. So I wanted to throw my hat into the ring of what cards I personally feel should be touched and modified on the coming Banlist. But before we get into that, a huge shout out as always to my newest patrons. So big shout outs to Salem as well as Cameron. And if you guys want to help support me and the channel through Patreon, then check out the link in the description below. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So before I start, I want to kind of go over the climate that the game is currently in. Now, you have to think, we have new sets coming out in the future after this Banlist is supposedly going to be released. But what products do we have coming out? Well, we have the Wave of Light structure deck, which is the Counter Fairy structure deck, coming out in January. And then after that, we have the Extreme Force coming out in the beginning of February. And then we also have the legendary Duelist Ancient Millennium pack, I believe it's called, coming out in the middle of February as well. But other than that, we're not really getting any other new products injected into the game. I believe the Kaiba Legendary Collection comes out in March, but there isn't really anything outside of that that is going to be really giving us anything brand new into the game to work with other than the aforementioned products. But when you look at what's going to be included in these products, there's nothing in here that's really going to be shaking up the meta in any earth-shattering way. The Counter Fairy structure deck, while it's okay, it didn't really see any success whatsoever in Japan, maybe on like a local level, but that's about it. But that doesn't obviously mean it won't have any effect here in the TCG. Just going based off that trend though, it doesn't look too likely. Then in Extreme Force, even though there are some new archetypes that are going to be released, there isn't really anything that's just kind of, other than the just amazing Link monsters that were supposed to be in the Link Vrains pack that are coming out, like Heavy Metal Foes Electromite, the Lightsworn Link monster, and the Noble Light Link monster, things like that. There isn't really anything in the core set itself that is really going to be shaking up the meta anytime soon. Same thing goes for the Legendary Collection pack as well. So with that in mind, we really need to kind of put the meta in check where it currently stands, because there's not like any new product that's going to be coming out in the next few months that's really going to be changing anything in a significant way. So starting off with the banned cards. The first card on the list is Maxie. Now, again, Maxie is a very polarizing card depending on who you ask. Some people say it should go to 3, some people say it should go to 0. I am on the side that says it should go to 0. Now, the reason for this is very simple. This is a card that, while it's currently limited here in the TCG, I feel is entirely unfair to the player who happens to end up drawing it. It gives them an unfair advantage because it puts the player who's under Maxie in such a predicament that it really just isn't fair, because they have to either stop their play outright entirely or give their opponent so many resources that even if they commit to the board, their opponent's gonna have so much card advantage that they're gonna be able to out whatever board that their opponent ends up making. Now, some people say it should go to 3, but the same logic still applies. Even if both players have 3 Maxies, if only one player draws it, the player who draws it has an unfair advantage from that standpoint. So personally, I would just like to see the card banned outright. I think it's much more fair from that perspective, because then you don't have to worry about your opponent having it. And it's not exactly like it's a card that you can really play around, and you can't really always expect to have the Ash Blossom for the Maxie either. So many games have been lost solely because of Maxie's existence, and I personally believe that it's time for the card to be hit on the ban list. Now, there are a couple other cards I have going to Forbidden as well, and one of them is Grindr Golem. Now, Grindr Golem, for those of you who don't know, is basically just an absolute force currently in the OCG, because it's able to do so many new things thanks to Master Rule 4 and the Link summoning mechanic in general. You're able to produce so many different tokens. Grindr Golem enables so many degenerate OTKs. It also enables just so much just unfair just card design. The card was not intended to do what it's doing currently in the OCG, to put it candidly, and frankly, it just shouldn't be a card that currently exists, because it's a one one card OTK in most circumstances. It does so many other things, and yeah, it prevents you from using your normal summon, but that's completely just not even a factor when you see the huge and massive power level that this card has in the OCG. Sure, there's a card like Gofu that's at 1, but Gofu compared to Grindr Golem is not even a fair comparison because Grindr Golem does so much more degenerate bullshit that I definitely feel it's warranted that it gets a preemptive hit on the ban list before we get the other tools here to make it just that much more degenerate here in the TCG. The last card I have on the ban list following suit with Grindr Golem is Level Eater. Now, Level Eater I feel deserves to be forbidden for some of the same reasons as Grindr Golem, but also different at the same time. If there's any combo that ever does manifest itself, and it's some degenerate OTK or FTK, Level Eater is more often than not a reason for that card's existence, or that OTK's existence, rather. And the thing is, even if there might not be anything discovered at the moment, there's always instances where Level Eater, especially now that we're in Master Rule 4, especially that Link Karibo is going to be legal in the TCG in a matter of time, then it's just going to just create so many degenerate plays, and I feel like just hitting Level Eater outright is just a good way to go, just to stop it before it becomes a problem that needs to be dealt with later. So, nothing too big on the forbidden list other than Maxie itself, but I think Grindr Golem and Level Eater are good cards to put in check just because they're cards that we really don't want to deal with here in the TCG in any way, shape, or form. Now, moving on to the limited cards, and this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So, starting off with the limited cards, we have Spiral Resort. Now, Spiral Resort going to 1 is very interesting because it does multiple things. First of all, it affects the consistency of Spiral tremendously, considering it is still the best deck of the format. Also, by having 1 Resort, you now have so much less protection from all your opponent being able to target all of your Spiral monsters, which is basically one of the reasons that Spiral Resort was the godly field spell that it was. But in addition to that, by also putting a check on Spiral Resort, you're also putting a check on Spiral Master Plan, because if you have to use Spiral Resort to search your 1 copy of whatever card you need to complete your Spiral combo, Master Plan actually cannot activate because you don't have another copy of Spiral Resort to search, meaning you're not going to be able to combo off with Master Plan and do what you need to do to go off playing Spiral. I think this is a really good hit. They actually just did this in the OCG as well, and yes, Spiral will still be playable, but a massive hit to consistency like Spiral Resort, as well as their resilience to being targeted by a myriad of different card effects, I think would be a really good hit and would put the deck in check. It wouldn't kill it outright because I don't think Konami wants to do that yet, but it makes the deck still playable, a very good contender, without just absolutely castrating it. Now, moving on from there, in the same light of hitting meta decks, I also think Trickstar Reincarnation should go to 1 as well. This is a card that's also at 1 in the OCG, and Trickstar is definitely very much still playable with this card still at 1, but Trickstar Reincarnation going to 1 does several things. First, it stops the ability of the degenerate multiple reincarnation combos, especially with Draw Unlock, and makes the Draw Unlock combo that much less consistent because you only have the 1 reincarnation, although it is still searchable, but now you can't go reincarnation, and Draw Unlock and just flat out just beat your opponent before they're even able to start their turn. I think that actually gives a little bit of balance to that mechanic without just flat out wrecking Trickstar's strategy entirely, but still gives them that 1 card that they can disrupt their opponent with and allows the deck to still function in a very good way. The deck is still very much playable and still seeing play in Japan, even with Trickstar Reincarnation still at 1. So I think that even though a lot of Trickstar players might not like Reincarnation going to 1, it's another one of these hits that it's good for the game for, you know, looking forward into the future without outright killing a deck entirely, because Trickstar is still a very popular deck thanks to the new anime, and I think a lot of people still want to play the deck in general. Now, another card I think that needs to be hit is Firewall Dragon. Now again, this just went to 1 in the OCG as well, but I think hitting Firewall Dragon's really good because it stops the ability to loot multiple Firewall Dragons, very similarly to with Grindr Golem and Level Eater and all the degenerate combos that's capable of doing. I think Firewall Dragon to 1 is good because most decks benefit from playing 1 Firewall Dragon, but when you get to multiples, that's when you start getting into some really absurd stuff, and I don't think a lot of people like that. But having the 1 is really cool. You can still do like your Trickstar OT 40k and stuff like that. So I think having it at 1 is healthy and also puts a check on some more degenerate combos. Now, some other cards I want to discuss, and these are more cards that are older that I want to see put back into the game, starting off with Shuret, Strategist of the Necros. Now, the OCG actually has Shuret at 2, I believe, and I think putting this card back to 1 would be really interesting to see because, you know, we still have Unicorn at 1, we still have Brio at 1, but I think it'd be nice to see that if there is any potential for Necros to re-enter the format, having Shuret being at 1 would be an excellent way to kind of start that off. We also have Preparation of Rites at 2, so that would be really interesting to see if any former Necros players would like to see to make the deck work in any way whatsoever. The last card on the limited list I want to bring back is El Shaddoll Construct. Now, this is here for a couple reasons. First of all, you guys know that I do love Shaddolls, and I love just Construct as a card in general, but this also makes sense because if the Shaddoll Link monster is in the Extreme Force as an import, then that actually makes sense to bring Construct back because it kind of inadvertently gives people who want to play Shaddolls more reason to play, not only because they're going to be a new Link monster, but also because Construct would be back at 1. Would it really have an impact on the format? I don't really think it would, maybe at like a local or regional level and makes the deck at least somewhat playable, but I think it would just be nice to kind of help promote these new Link monsters that we're going to be getting. Now, in that same spirit, going on to semi-limits, I also think moving a card like Graph or Seer, probably Graph of the Burning Abyss, going to 2 would make a lot of sense, because if we get the Burning Abyss Link monster in Extreme Force as well, again, it kind of helps promote the set and makes people want to play the archetype more because there's more options available to them. I think Graph over Seer because Seer Dante loop is still a thing, especially since we have Dante at 3, and I think that by having Graph at 2, it just kind of makes people, especially in tandem with the Burning Abyss Link monster, maybe more inclined to want to experiment with a deck like Burning Abyss. Hell, Burning Abyss is still doing somewhat well on a competitive level, even with Spiral being the best deck of the format, so having a little boost that way I think would be really cool. And then also Cleafort, Scout, or Sacrifice going to 2 in that same line of thinking, because if the Cleafort Link monster is in Extreme Force as well, again, just another card to come off the list to kind of help support and boost the sales for Extreme Force and kind of get people excited that we are getting these Link monsters. The last card at semi-limit is Miscellaneous. Now, Miscellaneous is a card that is extremely powerful, but remember we don't have Denglong, and we also don't have True King Lithosejim, which are 2 of the True King Dinosaurs deck's heavy powerhouses. Now, having this card go to 2 would give a boost to Dinosaurs, which are seeing some competitive play, especially even at a YCS level, and I think would make some Dinosaur players happy just to get one of those Miscellaneous back into their decks. Now, lastly, for the unlimits, frankly, you could unlimit a ton of cards on the list. I mean, you could unlimit cards as powerful as Atlantean Dragoons to help support Mermail. Again, if we get the Mermail Link in Extreme Force, kind of makes sense. But also cards as bad as Brain Control, which even if they're at 3, they're going to see no play whatsoever. But the biggest thing I want you guys to keep in mind is the fact that there is another deck I did not talk about whatsoever, and that is Pendulum Magician. Now, a lot of people might argue that because Pendulum Magician hasn't really been seeing much play, it shouldn't really get a hit on the ban list, but I have a theory. The reason I don't have any Pendulum Magician cards on my list is the fact that Heavy Metal Foes Electromite is basically the card that's going to sell Extreme Force. So basically what's going to happen is, once Extreme Force comes out in February, it's going to give this massive boost to Pendulum Magician. They're not going to hit any of the cards because Pendulum Magician is going to become an absolutely absurdly powerful deck, possibly the best deck of the format, but then we're going to get a new ban list either in March, maybe the middle of March, or maybe the beginning of April, which is then going to put the deck in check and kind of revisit and rebalance where the decks are at the moment, since we don't really have a lot of extra product being injected into the market. That's just my theory, but I think it's very realistic because if they want to sell Extreme Force, having the best card support one of the strongest decks by not hitting it, since it's currently not one of the best decks at the moment, is a good way to help sell the product and help boost the deck's power. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the January 2018 ban list and what cards you guys would like to see on that list as well. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video insightful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.